This session is being recorded. I will share it on our website. I will put it on our YouTube. So if you do not want your camera on, just be mindful of that. I also will rewatch it to take all of the notes. I owe you one from April as well. If you all want to introduce yourselves in the chat, name, organization, how many years you've been gardening, whatever you feel like sharing, we love to see it. And I am very excited to be introducing Bethany Bay, the Chicago gardener. Bethany grew up in Indiana, helping her grandpa in his garden, and she always knew she wanted to garden one day. However, she thought she would need to wait to have a yard. After living in Chicago, yardless for 10 years, she got tired of waiting. So she created a container garden on her 18 by 19 square foot rooftop decks. We're really excited to have her. You know that we are all about the container gardening for a variety of reasons. And so today we're going to learn a little bit more about flowers in containers. Additionally, she has a home filled with houseplants that are incorporated into the part of the decor. And she is currently working toward her horticulture certification and sharing her plant journey along the way. If you're not already following her on Instagram and YouTube, please do so. I will share the links in the chat and follow up with them with resources after. Welcome, Bethany. Thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can correctly screen share the photos of my garden.
We can see it.
Okay, you can see it still?
Yes.
Perfect. So I wanted to include photos because my garden does not look like this right now. I am still in the process of planting things outside, but I have two rooftop decks. One faces the west, which gets the full afternoon sun, and that's the one that I have the photos of right now. And then I have another one that faces east, and that one gets full morning sun. So it does get quite hot up here. I really don't have any heart shade areas. So I can grow most things as long as it's not something that really hates full sun, like some of my hydrangeas that I tried in the past. But over the years, so we've been here now since 2020, I started out mostly with vegetables and I still have some, but then the world of buying flower seeds online kind of made me shift over to a lot more flowers in my garden just because they make me happy, but also I like to harvest them and give out bouquets on the sidewalk. So that's been really fun. I am trying to make it a bit more balanced this year with flowers and vegetables, but we'll see how that goes. So the front deck here, I will grow a lot of the same things every year. Over the last few years, I've kind of figured out what's worked best or what I like the best, and then some things that have not worked. So in the right photo here, I do have an herb garden up here. And for that, I use terracotta pots. They're 8 inches. I could probably go a little bit larger, but you can also see they are surrounded by a bunch of flowers. Some of my favorite ones that I grow, the pink ones right behind the herb rack, those are Supertunia Vista. I like Supertunia specifically out of all the petunias, but these are basically colorful from the beginning of the season until the end, or until the budworms start to eat my flowers and I have to remove them. But these are one of my top 3, I'd say, just because of the instant continuous color in the garden. And they get pretty large for a petunia plant. Another one of my favorite flowers for containers in the bed where the pink petunias are, those are zinnias. So I really like any cut and come again flowers, because in a small space, if I can have a plant that I can harvest the flowers off of and then more grow, that works really, really well. So I would say the majority of the flowers that I do grow are cut and come again. So I have taken off all the flowers in the center bed, and within a week, it's full again. So make sure that if you do have cut and come again flowers, you are taking advantage of it. So zinnias are also in my top 3. I do struggle with powdery mildew a little bit on my plants, but I love them enough to make up for the powdery mildew. So again, these would bloom for you throughout the season unless some sort of disease issue takes over. I do have a few sunflowers. I think you can see in the back there. They are growing in a raised bed. I like sunflowers because you can space them so close together. I think those are probably about 2 inches apart in that raised bed, but I don't have a ton. I used to have a ton, but because these specific ones aren't cut and come again, I'm leaning more towards the flowers that are just a bit more productive, but I do love them and they are pretty. And I've grown them in that same bed, in that same position now since I think 2022. So once I find something that I really like, I stick to it. I do have a variety of containers. I have some more images later that'll show the containers completely empty, but just in general, I have some raised beds or elevated beds technically because they have a bottom on them. That's great to give me more space to garden, but also I don't have to bend down. And I really like just being able to walk up to my raised bed and garden. These are wooden. I think every one that I have is made of cedar wood. They do have plastic, they have metal. I went towards the wood because in general it is lightweight until I fill it with soil and plants. And gardening on a rooftop deck, I do have to be conscious of how much weight our deck can hold. So we do know like the pounds per square foot of our deck capacity. If you are thinking of installing anything heavier like that, I would make sure to find that out before just putting a bunch of heavy pots filled with soil, filled with plants, just for the safety of your deck. But other containers that I have plastic pots, I have terracotta pots. I used to have more ceramic pots because they were pretty, but I have moved away from that over time just because one, I can't really leave them outside over winter. They will likely crack. I do have some downstairs on our front steps that have cracked because they are too heavy to move. And that's also the second issue is they are heavy. So everything that I have on this deck has to be carried up 2 flights of stairs. And if I want to move things around or take the pots inside, the prettiness of the ceramic pots didn't really make up for what I felt like was the lack of usability when gardening on a rooftop deck. Now, if you are container gardening closer to the ground, that might not be an issue for you, but if you do have to carry things up, that's something you want to keep in mind. A lot of what I do carry up, it comes up in pieces. So for example, with the elevated beds, I carry them up and then put them together up here. And that's maybe a couple trips with the pieces because in general, again, those aren't too heavy. The lightest weight container is definitely the grow bags. So most of my vegetables, this is the little grow bag patch here, are growing in either a 30-gallon grow bag or a 7-gallon grow bag. I love grow bags, first because they are so inexpensive, at least compared to other size containers. If I was trying to find a 30-gallon ceramic or even plastic pot, it would be hundreds of dollars. One 30-gallon grow bag was $5 in the pack that I've got, and I've had them since 2019. So I've definitely got the use out of them for the low cost. But that's the main reason I like them is just being able to have larger containers at a lower cost. I will say they aren't necessarily the prettiest, but I do prefer the color black. I've tried other colors like lighter colors or pink or beige, and those get dirty and stained very quickly. So if you are someone that doesn't want to see your grow bags being dirty, I do tend more towards the black or some dark brown bags now as well. And then the other 7-gallon, that's kind of been my happy medium size. I have grown vegetables in a 5-gallon grow bag before, and it worked well, but I just found out that they dried out so quickly that the extra few gallons in a 7-gallon really is helpful. Grow bags will dry out the fastest. So since I am in full sun, and again, this deck is the full afternoon sun, so it's even hotter, those do dry out the quickest of all of the containers that I have. I do have irrigation set up, which has been very, very helpful in the garden, especially as I keep adding more and more to it. You can't see it because it's covered in plants, but I do have irrigation to run every morning in the season or every other morning, depending on how hot it is up here. And that makes it a lot easier for me to know that that's done in the morning. Or if I want to go away for the weekend, I don't have to be super stressed out about my plants not surviving or needing someone to come over and water them. There's maybe a handful of pots that I do hand water, but I also really like self-watering containers. So in the bottom left, that is a self-watering container. And I filled that maybe once a week, even during like the hottest parts of the season. So that's another option that's really great if you want to be able to have low maintenance when it comes to watering your plants. In terms of other flowers that I really, really love, So I think you can see, actually, I don't know if I can see them very well, but in the back are cosmos. These are also cut and come again, and they're a plant that takes up a little bit more space. Like it has much more horizontal growth. It does mostly grow vertically, but more horizontal growth than like the zinnias do, for example. And they're just very wispy is the word I use to describe them, but they look very nice, just blowing in the wind. And then in some of my other pots, I'll typically do one plant per pot if it's a smaller pot. In a larger pot, I might do 3 or 4 flowers together inside of it. But just because I have a lot more smaller containers, I try not to plant too many in there at a time. Again, just so I keep the plants happy and it doesn't dry out where I have to water it multiple times a day, even after my irrigation runs. So this is the front deck. It does look a little bit different every year, but pretty much I put the similar plants in the same places. So then next, if I can go, is my back deck. So this is the east facing deck. It still gets full sun, but some flowers that cannot survive on the west facing deck can survive out here. So I do have, they're not in this photo, but I do have hydrangeas that I can grow happily on this deck that will burn to a crisp on the front deck. So for me, that's always funny that, you know, these decks are just a few feet apart, but the growing environment is very, very different. I have another one of my favorite flowers here. So the third of my top three is Gomphrena, and that is what is in these terracotta pots. I also plant a whole raised bed of them because I love them so much. They are also cut and come again, and they look really pretty dried. The majority of the flowers I would say I do use in fresh bouquets, but I also really like to have dried flowers just to use throughout the winter. So Gomphrena looks almost identical when it's growing in the garden and then compared to how it looks dried. Other good dried flowers that I grow are statice and then straw flowers, and both of those are also cut and come again. If you see a big burst of color, that's probably a petunia. I can't remember the exact varieties of some of these. I do know this one is Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. That's one plant early on in the season. As it got further along in the season, it completely covered the pot that it's in. So that is how vigorous they can grow. I think this one is another Supertunia, either fuchsia or Vista Jazzberry. And that I have in a pot with my zinnias. That's also just one plant tucked in there, whereas the zinnias, I think I had 3 different plants in here. And then along the back where you kind of see the border here, this is actually 3 raised beds. They're not as tall as the ones on my front deck, but they are maybe like 20 inches, that the maximum height. So I do have to bend down a little bit, but it's not as bad as if it was just sitting on the ground. So those I really like because you can't even tell they're there. Like this looks like these plants could be growing out of the ground, except the ground is a deck, so they aren't. So I really like having that and then having the other pots in front of it. I will say with a wooden deck, I am more careful. In most of my, well, for most of my containers now, I do have something under them, especially the grow bags, because those act like sponges when they're wet. But at this point, I have almost all of my pots on wheels, or at least some sort of plant lift to get them off the deck, but also to make them easier to move around. Except for my raised beds, those I don't really have wheels on. I think it would be too heavy to work, and I can't lift up the bed and put them on there now. But in general, I try to be as safe as I can with my rooftop deck. But if you're not working on a wooden deck, that might not be a problem for you. So this is kind of my garden at its peak here. And then I have these. So this is what it looks like with no plants. I mean, there are some pots, you know, on the ground that are missing here, but for the most part, the major planters that I use are all here. So that's how large that you can fill a garden and make it seem so full, and then it's empty. And it's such a drastic difference to me. At some points, I do have a hard time walking around the garden because there are so many plants sticking out. So I do try to at least leave a pathway, but it can be really hard when there's more and more pretty flowers to put in. So this again is the west facing deck. The center raised bed here, that's probably my largest. And then the 2 wooden ones behind it are just slightly more narrow. but I can fit probably 15 to 20 plants if I'm going a little bit closer on spacing. When I am planting in a larger container, I will be aware of the recommended spacing, but I typically don't follow the recommended spacing, especially with annuals that are only going to be there for one season. So I'll maybe shave off like 2 to 3 inches just so I can put more plants into my containers. And for the most part, that seems to work out really well, and I can just fit more in a smaller space in my garden. Another question I get asked a lot is, do I empty out my containers every year? I do not. I can't even imagine what I would have to do to take all of the soil out of my raised beds, carry it down and put it somewhere, I don't know where, and then carry a bunch of new bags of potting mix upstairs. So all I do every season in my larger containers like this, everything stays in there. I mean, I'll pull out the plants, but then I will add a lot of compost at the beginning of the spring season. And I also need to add perlite because I find that the potting soil becomes much more condensed over time, which can cause root rot in the plants if there's not enough drainage. But those are really the two main things that I'll add at the beginning of every season. Throughout the season, I'll add granular fertilizer, I'll do liquid fertilizers, but I have never emptied out my raised beds since 2020. And so far, I haven't had an issue with growing healthy plants. So I'm going to keep doing that until it stops working, which fingers crossed it doesn't, because I really don't want to have to empty these out. On the right side then here too, those are the shorter raised beds. That again was that back border where you couldn't even really see them. I do like the lower raised beds because it does help with the wind a little bit. You're growing on a rooftop, might be a little bit more windy than down at ground level. So the flowers that I grow have a little bit more protection. In fact, I don't think I've ever lost a flower or had a flower break from the wind on the back deck. I have had it on this deck here where the beds are a little bit higher. So I tend to stake flowers more than probably someone who is growing at ground level. And I will just add either cages or poles and twine just to keep them upright, because I know it is going to be windy up here. But again, if you're at ground level, you might not have to be quite as protective against the wind, but over the years, that's what I found to be one of my main struggles up here. Some other issues, well, there are some things I do deal with growing flowers in containers, but mostly on a rooftop deck. I don't have to deal with squirrels, rabbits, deer, anything else that can't fly. I do have some birds up here. They don't seem to bother my garden very much, fingers crossed. So I don't have a lot of common pest issues. I get insects up here, so I will deal with those. And I probably get like fungal issues at about the same rate as someone growing on the ground. So just keeping that in mind, that if I'm growing something up here and it looks really great, growing on the ground, it might need a little bit more protection from, I've heard squirrels are the worst. So that's the ones that you probably want to look out for most in the city. But this is my collection of pots. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of thinking outside of the box when it comes to container gardening. So this is a lot of flowers. My flower cart, what I call it, is underneath all of these flowers. So it's just a metal cart that has a roof, which the morning glory is growing on top of. There is a shelf behind these white flowers here that stores my watering cans, some saucers or pots, and you can't see them, which I think is nice. I don't have as many gardening materials as probably someone with a larger space, but my stuff has to be stored outside. So if I can kind of hide it and no one can see it, I really like that. So then even underneath here with the Silver Falls dichondra, this is one plant. I highly recommend these for trailing plants. There's a lower shelf here that has even more of my garden equipment. So thinking of taking something that might not be a container, but turning it into something I can grow plants up. So there's a pot here that you can't see. This is black-eyed Susan vine. It is probably my favorite climbing plant, only because it actually does flower for me. Morning glory doesn't really flower for me that often. And in fact, I don't know if I'm growing it at all this year because I've just fallen in love with this one here. Dichondra Silver Falls, in terms of trailing plant, I love it so much. It is what I call my curtain to hide, again, all of my equipment. And then this is the Gomphrena. So this is another color of the Gomphrena. I believe this is 3 plants in a 12-inch pot, and you can see how full it gets. And I feel like that was pretty good in terms of it didn't dry out too quickly. The plant stayed healthy, but I was able to fit a lot in a pot, more than just 1 plant per pot. Also, it is on wheels, so I can move it around. And again, this is the one I like to harvest, dry them, and then use them in decor throughout the winter season. I actually do a dried flower Christmas tree, which I really like every season. So I really love having those throughout my garden. Oh, also, Gomphrena is probably my lowest maintenance plant. They do really well in heat, which is great for being up here. They don't need as much water as some of my other annuals. And at least so far, I have never had a pest issue with it or any sort of disease issue. So this is the plant that for me just keeps growing and looking good, even if I ignore it for a longer period of time. So I would say definitely think out of the box. You can do trellises to save some space. I do have some of those, but anything that I can get to grow vertically, I also try to find. You can't see it, but there is a tomato cage under here too, which is helping this plant grow up and then to reach out on the top of this flower cart. So I think that was in general everything I wanted to talk about. If we want to jump into any questions now.
Yeah, we had one question and a comment come through the chat. Are most of all of your flowers direct sown? Any advice about when to plant seeds? Do you have a list or spreadsheet with varieties and planting schedules? And also, they enjoyed your YouTube videos this morning.
Okay, I'm gonna try to remember all of those things.
They're in
I
the
would
chat.
say,
So, and let me know if you want me to go
oh,
one by
yeah,
one.
let me see that. I would say about 50-50 between what I start from seed and what I get from the garden center. I start from seed either plants I'm growing a lot of, like my zinnias and gomphrena. I will have at least 10, if not 20 or more in the garden. Anything that I'm growing like 1 or 2 of, for example, the herbs here or the salvia, I only had 2. I will just get those from the garden center because for me, it just is a lot easier. I don't have to keep them alive inside throughout the winter or early spring. So I will buy plants that I don't grow a lot of from the garden center and then start from seed varieties that I do, or varieties that I can't necessarily find in the garden center, which is what happened with the flowers and why there are not as many vegetables anymore in my garden. Also, between starting from seed and buying from the garden center, like right now, if I go out to my garden, everything that I started from seed that I've planted is still green. It's going to be a while before they flower. My zinnias will probably start the earliest in mid-June, and I started them inside April, so about 2 months. Most of my garden is in flower starting in July. So I have a lot of green for a while. And since our growing seasons aren't very long here in Chicago, or they could be longer, I also like to get starts from the garden center because those are usually already blooming. So I can buy something now, like I can buy a super tunia now in May. It's already full of flowers. I put it in my garden and I have some extra color there. And another thing I like to do, so most of what's in this back border here is started from seed or tubers like my dahlias. And then what's in front are a lot of the plants from the garden center so that there is that color there while the other plants are waiting to grow and flower. What was the next part of that? Was the chat?
Any advice about when to plant seeds?
Ooh, yes. If we can figure out how, I do have a spreadsheet on Google Drive that I can share. Like I can send you a link to, and then you can share it out. And that will show you everything I did start from seed this year, the dates I started them from seed, all of that information. I can kind of show you how I organize all of that. I usually start at the earliest 8 weeks before last frost. And I do use Mother's Day as the last frost date, even though I think Farmer's Almanac says like end of April or April 20th, which I don't think I've ever been able to plant everything out at the end of April. We still have nights that get pretty cold. So I will go 2 weeks back from Mother's Day. So around mid-March, I will start my plants that take the longest. So Gomphrena takes the longest. If I'm doing any, trying to think of what else I would start early on. I think maybe my asters I started a bit earlier, but I have started 10 weeks before, and that was just a little too early in my experience because the plants got larger than they wanted to be inside and were very, very eager to get outside. So I like to plan it so that they're not getting huge while they're still inside and taking up a lot of space, but that they still have at least a good amount of size on them to give them a head start in the garden. So I'll go from like 8 weeks. I have a batch that's 7, I have a batch that's 6, and that's all laid out in my spreadsheet. So I just open it up on the weekend, figure out which ones I'm starting, get those seeds out. And then I'll go up to like 4 weeks before last frost. That's when I start my zinnias because they do grow so quickly. And then everything else is pretty much direct sown. Like my sunflowers are direct sown because if it's only going to be 2 to 3 weeks before last frost, might as well just direct sow them anyway, because I don't think they would be very large. I do have grow lights. In the past, I have been able to seed start without grow lights, but that was when we had full like door size windows that face the south. So they got full sun all day. I would say, I mean, now I have grow lights, so I would say probably most people are going to want to have grow lights for their seedlings. I just have a metal baker's rack, and then I have grow lights either zip tied or with magnets, and then I set it up to a timer so that it turns on and off every day. So I don't have to worry about it. They turn on usually before I'm up in the morning, and they turn off sometime during the night because I will forget to turn off the lights. I do have some grow lights that are facing my house plants that sometimes I accidentally leave on all night, and that is not good for them. So that's kind of like the 4 to 8 weeks is when I'll start, or I'm direct sowing. Was there another part of that, or was that everything there?
That was everything.
Okay.
Oren, did you have any other questions from that didn't get answered? You unmuted, but we can't hear you. That's weird.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, no, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yay, good.
Carmen, yes, there will be a copy of this video, this recording, but also it sounds like Bethany is going to share out her spreadsheet with us,
Yeah.
which is really exciting. So
It'll be
keep an
view
eye on that.
only when I share it out, just so that you're not editing the one I work with. But when you get the view only link, you can download it and then you can edit it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll send it in the follow-up, and I'll give all those directions for how to do that as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Other
Yeah, I love
questions?
it.
We love a good spreadsheet in this group.
Oh, I will say also, in terms of planning, I don't have my phone right here, but there is an app I really like, From Seed to Spoon, where it takes your location and then you can literally open it and it'll tell you what you need to start that week or what they recommend starting that week. So From Seed to Spoon. There's a free version and a paid version. I'm pretty sure you can get all the basic scheduling information in the free version. So I would say check that out, because when I started and I had no idea, that's what I followed. And still in the spring and fall, when I'm like, what am I supposed to be planting now? I do still check that because I'm like, oh, I should be starting, my fall round of peas right now, and I've completely forgotten.
Yes. We got another question about watering all of this efficiently.
Yes, that is why I set up the irrigation. The very first year I did not have irrigation. I also did not have this large of a garden, and I would water, but I would sometimes forget again to go out there. So this way it makes it a lot easier to manage, but I also feel like it waters much more efficiently because it's all at the base of the plant. So it's not like with a hose where I might be spraying the leaves. It's all down at the base, and I can adjust the time for exactly when my pots seem like they have the right amount of water in them. Now, because some containers are larger and some are smaller, I do try to find that happy medium of when the water first starts to drain out of my smaller pots. If I have to go back outside in the afternoon, which I really only have to do in the very, very hot parts of summer, I might have to manually water a few of them. But if you can set up irrigation, it seems much more complicated than it actually is. I promise. That was one thing where it's just so many pieces, but as soon as you start to do it, it's the same process over and over again. So I would highly recommend an irrigation system with a timer so that it's running on its own.
I shared the YouTube video that you did of it in the chat. So if people want to take a look at it, I will also share out her YouTube channel after, which has all sorts of tips and tricks that come into play.
And also again, self-watering pots, because for those I water once a week and it's fantastic. I mean, probably even once every 2 to 3 weeks when it's been cooler.
Other questions? One came in the chat. I noticed in your videos this morning that you companion plant your tomatoes. What do you recommend as companion plants?
So I like marigolds, but I will say make sure you check the height of them, because I first didn't know that marigolds got 4 feet tall, and those were the first seeds I got. So always check the height and make sure that whatever your companion planting isn't going to completely cover the main plant in there. But I do like the shorter marigolds. I also like basil with my tomatoes, also because a lot of the times if I'm harvesting tomatoes, I'm also going to grab some basil as well. Other plants that I put in there are nasturtiums. I really like those, stay a bit lower to the ground and you can eat those and they taste really good. So I would say definitely look for something a bit shorter than the main plant, and then something that doesn't grow like too wide either. But I have 30-gallon grow bags, like I said. So if I just put one tomato in there, it would definitely be like wasted space. I did grow two 1 year and they did fine. I just didn't prune them enough to not create a tangled mess. But I try if I can to plant things with other things as long as the container is large enough.
So the follow-up part to that is, do you companion plant in the 7 gallons or just in the 30 gallons?
Just in the 30 gallons. Sometimes I will put more in the 7 gallon than I think I should, but I'm not worried about companion planting in those. That's just in my larger containers. But I might grow like more than I should if I'm just trying to squeeze as many plants as possible. But it's mostly the larger containers I focus on.
Okay. And then another question, what do you know the height of the grow bag that you used for the indeterminate tomatoes?
Yes, I believe it's 30 inches diameter and also about 30 inches tall. So it's easy to remember with the 30 gallons. Oh, but it is on wheels now, which adds probably 4 extra inches of height. And I can't recommend wheels enough for containers because I could not move those 30-gallon grow bags on my own. Like I could not pick them up and carry them once they're full. So wheels on everything. I'm trying to even think if I have anything right now that's not on wheels other than my raised bed.
You mentioned that you leave the soil out in the winter. Do you do that for all of the containers, so the terracotta and the grow bags as well?
Good question. So for the larger ones, yes. So like my 30-gallon grow bags, I do the exact same thing with my raised beds. The terracotta pots do come inside with me. So those I empty out. Plus, it's probably a little bit smaller than most of my herbs want. So when I take them out, there's like barely any soil left. It's all a root ball. So any of my containers where the root ball has taken over the majority of the space, those all come out. Some of the 7 gallons I will empty out completely, again, based on the root ball size, but I have grown some in the past where the roots actually don't take up much of the soil, so I've left some in there. But what I do, so let's say that there was some soil left in a terracotta pot, I have a plastic bin that's under one of my raised beds that I dump that into. So I will save all the soil even in the smaller pots, and then I do the same thing in the spring with compost and perlite and whatever other stuff I might have that I want to toss in there as well. So I save as much soil as I can.
And do you have like a preferred combination of soil, parts like compost perlite to soil ratios?
I don't have any specific ratios. When I'm adding the perlite, I just try to get it back to the same feeling of a fresh bag of potting mix. So it's like light and fluffy, and I'll just keep mixing until I get there. I did have it recommended. I don't think I've ever gone this far, but I had peonies and the grower recommended 50% perlite to 50% potting mix. So if you have a plant that really, really likes drainage, you can go pretty heavy on the perlite. And then for the compost, I try to put in 2 inches on the top of the current soil and then mix that in all together. But if I have more compost, I will also just toss that in as well.
Other questions? I don't have a lot today. Um, oh, I saw one come. For tomatoes, oh, this was a statement. For tomatoes, you can grow successfully in 5 gallon grow bags, so do not despair if you have limited space. But Oren does like the thought of a 30-gallon system.
Yeah, and I know another person in the neighborhood where they do grow them in small pots, and if you're growing indeterminate tomatoes, you can prune them a lot if you still don't have a lot of space, and they're growing them up a string, and there's literally like just a branch and some like small branches off of it. So if you get an indeterminate tomato, grow it vertically, and you can prune it down to fit wherever it is that you need it to fit.
And when you go out of town, one question we get a lot is like people are like, I can't go out of town in the summer because nobody's going to take care of my garden as well as I do. What is your advice and or do you have people you trust?
I get stressed out leaving my garden anytime, even though I know I have irrigation. We actually have cat sitters that come, and so I try to make it as easy as I can for them. If I have maybe 5 containers that aren't hooked up to irrigation, the first thing I'll do is try to move them to the shadiest part of the deck. There's like one corner that has like slightly more shade throughout the day. So I'll move them to the shade so that they're not sitting out in the full sun. And that should be fine. I mean, I've done that for even a week, I think, away. So they're getting part sun, but not as much as they normally do. But I'll move them all in one section. I will take a photo. I'll lay the hose right by it, and then I will send them the photo so they know what pots to water. It's easier for me because so much is set up on irrigation. Like I would never expect my cat sitters to come out and water everything by hand. So I just try to, again, put them somewhere a little bit shadier, put them all together, and then lay the hose right by them. I will say in the past, I've called Gethsemane Garden Center, and they have, I don't think they have anyone that they do that personally, but they can recommend you specific plant sitters, which I think there should be more of in the city. So contact your local garden center and see if they know any plant sitters, because we did have someone come one time when it was near the beginning of the garden season. And I mean, they knew what to do. They knew if something needed more water, didn't need more water, needed a little bit of fertilizer, like they just knew that, but that's not what we do the majority of the time.
Um,
But I still
and
get stressed, by the way, every single time, no matter who's in
yeah,
my
yeah. Do you have a favorite supplier for any of your containers or for your seedlings that you do buy?
Um, well, most of my seedlings I get from a garden center. So
Okay.
those I will get like in person just so I can look at the plants and choose the ones I like. I go to Gethsemane just because it's the first one I ever got a house plant from. And they are quite large for a garden center in the city, but Home Depot is actually closest to us. So if I want to run and quickly grab a plant, I'll go over to Home Depot. My seeds, I like to get them from Johnny's Seed. I don't know if the like quality seems good, but it's just the company I started with because they have a lot of information on their seed packets. So when I had no idea what I was doing, I could just read that seed packet and it would tell me everything versus having to go back to their website or do a Google search. So I've stuck with Johnny's Seed for the most part for my seeds, but I think that's just a personal preference and not necessarily like a better seed quality preference. But I will say the quality has been good from them so far.
Great. Other questions? It sounds like don't go to Meineke Garden Center. Um, even though they're half the price of Gethsemane.
Oh.
Do you want to elaborate on that or no? Meineke.
Hello. I thought it might be easier for me to just chat here. So I go to Gethsemane all the time. They're literally right like down the street from me. I
Oh, I'm so
love
jealous.
them, but if you're getting a haul, it can get a little expensive. They're fantastic stuff, of course. But Mine Key Garden Center is up like right at the border of Skokie and Niles, and they have literal like greenhouses and greenhouses like I think they have 20 greenhouses full of seedlings, and they're like literally like if not half, if not a third, then half the price of Gethsemane. They might be smaller seedlings, but they're cheap and
Mm.
good quality. Just letting you know, PSA.
Yeah. Yeah, you said do
My list
not go
now.
there, but we should
No,
go
I
there.
said don't go there alone. Like
Oh, don't go
Oh,
there
don't
alone.
go there
no.
alone. Bring a friend to control your impulse.
Oh,
I
no.
see.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
it's
what I
only
would do.
$2. Take them all.
Yeah, anytime I go out of the city, because I grew up in Indiana, just an hour away, but that garden center is so much cheaper, so I'll just take plants from there and bring them back. Or like if we're up in Wisconsin, I'll stop at a garden center because generally outside of the city is going to be cheaper.
Yeah. Do you have advice or preferences, or do you use fertilizers?
Oh, I use whatever I can get from wherever. I would say probably what feels like the best quality, but I have no actual data for this. Like Purple Cow is a brand that seems to be really good, but it is also more on the expensive end. So I will get compost. I've gotten mushroom compost from Home Depot. I've gotten chicken manure compost online. I've gotten compost from Gethsemane. I think I don't know if they have their own potting mix or own compost as well, but I have done so many different brands of compost and I've never noticed a difference. So I will just get whatever is the cheapest and I can get my hands on at the time. I do also
Yeah,
have a tumbler composter, but I don't make enough that quickly to fill my garden.
I've heard there are some farms outside the city that will offer um free manure, but you have to go get it yourself, and
Yeah.
you don't always know the quality, but if you're maybe growing flowers and not eating it, you can maybe worth the experiment.
Yeah.
Another
If I
question
had
is,
a
have
pickup
you
truck,
made
I'd do
any
that.
teas? Yeah, have you made any teas?
Oh, so many teas. Oh, okay. I'm probably going to go too much into this. I would say 90% of what I use my herbs for is tea. And I will typically dry it. Sometimes if I want a certain tea right away and I don't have any dried, I'll use fresh. But I will harvest my herbs. I will dry them, hang them upside down for a couple weeks. And I actually store them in little glass jars with the labels on them. I still have some from last season. I have a bunch of herbs that I love. Chocolate mint is my favorite, especially for the winter. That one is pretty easy to find at garden centers. I also have pineapple sage, which is my favorite fruity one, and it tastes and smells like pineapple candies. That is also pretty commonly found at garden centers. And then I found a website online and I got strawberry mint, apple mint, orange mint, banana mint. I can't even remember all of the other ones, but I kind of went a little mint crazy. And I got a bunch of different flavors and they were all really, really good. Lemon balm. I'm trying to think what else I have. But yes, I do make a lot of tea. And also you can put in edible flowers if you want to make your tea look pretty at the end.
Anyone else making tea from their gardens or with their flowers that they want to share the recipes for?
I will say I made Gomfrina tea because you can do that, but it didn't taste like much. So I wouldn't recommend that.
For flower beginners, what would be maybe your advice on, one or two flowers to start with?
I would recommend zinnias, even though they do get powdery mildew at the end of the season. They grow so quickly that I think they're a really good one for beginners. And there's so many different sizes. You can get some that are like a foot tall, if not even a little shorter. You can get some that are like 4 feet tall, just based on what you want. So many colors, so many sizes, so that you can find, like, if you prefer, I don't know, really tiny red flowers, you can find that in a zinnia. So I would recommend those. And again, you can enjoy the flowers by cutting them and bringing them inside, and it'll continue to put out more and more flowers. I I do just love petunias because of how colorful they are. Again, I have budworms on those. I will also say impatiens I really like. They don't typically get as large as a petunia plant will, but they still have that same like bold color in the garden that just kind of lasts throughout the season. And those can also be in part shade as well. So I would recommend those. And I don't think I've had any pest issues with my petunias. They were ones that lasted the longest.
Awesome. Someone did ask, do you have fruit trees?
I do. I have 6. I used to have 7. I had a lemon tree, and it was too hard to keep inside for me over winter, although I do know a lot of people that will bring citrus trees inside over winter. I have 4 columnar apple trees, so they're very tall and narrow, which is great for small spaces. I have a Chicago hardy fig, which well, it says maximum is 20 feet. I don't know if that's going to be happy in a container for many, many years. We'll see. And then I also have a miniature peach tree. So one thing I am trying though this year that I haven't done yet is keeping them outside over winter. So I grow mostly annuals because I have struggled with keeping perennials alive in containers outdoors in Chicago. And I typically try to find plants between like zones 4 or lower, because we're zone 6. So you want to go lower if they're in containers and you're leaving them outside. Things that are like 2 and 3, usually I have no problem with. So my apple trees are all either 2 or 3. I can't remember which. I think my peach and fig though are like 5. So I'm going to try to like cover them as much as possible with tarps or whatever it is that I can do to try to insulate them over winter, because at this point they are in pots that are too large for me to move and carry down. I mean, if I really wanted to, I think I could dig it up and put it in a nursery pot and put it in the garage. I don't know if I want to take all those steps. I do want to try to make my garden as low maintenance as possible. So like only buying perennials that actually live outside in my garden, but sometimes I love something too much to let it go. So we'll see.
All right. Any final questions? I have put in the chat a link to the Chicago Gardener blog, which has some good, just like, helpful tips and tricks about different flowers. I've also shared the Chicago Gardener YouTube channel, which is spectacular. So if you want to know about container gardening with flowers, check that one out.
That's definitely more up to date than the blog.
Yeah, that's good to know. If you have missed any of the Chicago Grows Food Luncheon Grows, you can check out our website. We have all of them from last year on there. Most of those have recorded videos, also all of the notes. As always, you can join us on the Community Food Navigator. If you're not familiar, it is an app and a website connecting all of the Chicago food, gardening, health, justice people in the city and beyond. Israel, do you want to say anything else?
I think you did well. I think that's enough.
Okay. Any other questions generally about gardens or your garden or things happening that you need advice on? Oh, Israel, we got a question for you. How do we register our new community gardens on the Navigator?
Yeah, Nandita. So once you register in the app, so in order to, if you don't have an account on the app, you'll want to go on the website and fill out the interest form. But once you have an account on the app, there's a directory in the app where you can add your own garden to the directory if it's not already in there. And it's also a good way to find other gardens near you. But if you have more questions here, I'll put my email as well, so you can reach out to me if you have questions.
Yeah, I usually share Israel's email out afterwards as well. So if you do have Community Food Navigator questions, you'll see that in the follow-up email. And then lastly from me, we want to know your feedback on these sessions. We also want to know what topics you want to learn. Flowers in containers came up as a feedback from last year's survey. So if you have a request, let us know. We want to find the expert to talk about it or somebody really great to talk about it. So please, please, please give us your feedback. It's a pretty quick survey. And then, you can always reach out to us if you need anything regarding your garden, and we'll do our best to support it. Other questions, any final words, Bethany? We got a few more minutes, but I like to just get that all out because sometimes we go over time. So I wanted to catch people.
I can plug our garden walk, Sheffield Neighborhood Garden Walk, July 19th and 20th. You won't be able to see these gardens, but we are working on a garage deck, which hopefully will have plants and you can see it, but I also do bring a bunch of bouquets down that I made with flowers. And then you can just walk around and see other people's gardens. And then the Bucktown Garden Walk is also one of my favorites that I think is either the weekend before or after.
Chicago Grows Food will be at the Sheffield Garden Walk as well, giving out grow kits. So come find us if you're interested. We'll be at the Family Fest part of it.
That's so crowded. You're gonna have a lot of people.
It's gonna be fun. And if you if you follow Bethany on Instagram, I'm hoping again this year you'll put all of the garden walks that, come across your page. So keep an eye out. If it's not in one of those communities, it might be in your community. If it's not in your community yet, connect with somebody in one of those other communities to learn how to get it. There's some great, beautiful garden walks happening across the city to just highlight all of the cool things happening. Yes, let me share the Instagram. I'll share it out afterwards too. You'll
And
have
you know
it
what? I
all.
do have a spreadsheet also of the garden walks, so I will send you the link to that as well.
Yeah, great. I'm very excited for the spreadsheets.
Yes, there's so many. There are so many garden walks happening that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, a lot of neighborhoods have them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely follow her on Instagram. There's just a ton of great videos and advice, and the pigeons and the cats are always involved.
There's a lot of pigeon and cats too, so.
Do you think being on a roof and dealing with the diseases that actually it's harder to create the full ecosystem with the birds and the animals that would eat the pests because it's on a roof and they don't have the same access?
Yeah, just comparing it to the ground specifically, I don't know since I've only been doing it up here, but I will say the more different plants I've grown, the fewer pest issues I've had. So when I first started and it was all zinnias and some vegetables, I had more issues then compared to as I've started to add in. Mostly, I think it's the flowers that are attracting the beneficial insects. So as I've started to just throw a bunch of things in my garden, the more diverse my garden has become, the easier it has been to manage. I still can't get rid of budworms or powdery mildew, but a lot of things that I saw in previous years, I didn't really see the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's very good general gardening advice. And I know we have some very knowledgeable gardeners on the call. So I imagine that hopefully they agree that the more diversity you have in your garden, the less you're going to deal with pests. And refreshing your soil and moving plants around so that it's not always in the same soil can also really help, because the bugs then know what's going to be in that soil. And so they're going to more likely to attack it if they know it's coming back. So if you mix it up, if you do crop rotation, that's all going to help too.
And it's not in any of these photos, but I do also have some natives in my container garden as well. Again, just because they are perennials, I have had trial and error with actually keeping them alive in the beds over winter, but I have had milkweed and rudbeckia come back, and then half of the echinacea has come back. With the natives though, you want to be aware of how much they can spread, because my rudbeckia is basically taking over the bed it's in, so I'm going to put them in their own pots. But you can add natives to your garden as well that hopefully will come back year after year.
Yeah. Yeah, we love native plants in the yard. Okay, any final questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feedback? Thanks for showing up today. I will share all of this out as well as April's lunch and grow. So keep an eye on an email from me, and have great afternoons. Go plant some flowers. Thanks, Oren. Thanks so much, Bethany. We really appreciated you being here.
That was really fun.
All right, let me stop recording.